Hi everyone, I did not think that my life could turn out this way. My wife stopped loving and respecting me. This is what I want to share with you. What happens next will shock you. I've been married to Sarah for 12 years. We've got 2 kids, a decent little house in the suburbs, and what I thought was a pretty solid life together. I'm a construction worker. Nothing glamorous, but it's honest work, and I've always prided myself on doing everything I can to provide for my family. Sarah and I had our ups and downs like any couple, but there were always those moments of connection, those little sparks that reminded me why we got together in the first place. But lately, something's been off. She's been different. It started small, her getting home late, acting a little distant, brushing me off when I'd ask about her day. I chalked it up to stress, maybe she was tired from work or dealing with the kids more than usual. But then it kept happening. She stopped texting me back as quickly. She'd cancel plans last minute, and when we did hang out, she wasn't really there. It was like she was just going through the motions. I thought maybe it was just a phase, or maybe she was dealing with something personal, so I tried to be patient. But the cracks were starting to show. It wasn't just the cold shoulder or the late nights. She started dressing differently, more stylish, more put together, and that was strange because she's always been a jeans and t-shirt kind of woman. I didn't mind her trying to look good, but it felt like she was doing it for someone else, not for me. I don't know why, but one day, I decided to go through her phone. I know, it was a mistake. But I had to know. Something felt wrong, and I couldn't shake it. I found a bunch of texts, and my heart sank. They weren't from a friend or anyone I recognized. They were from some guy who signed his messages with a nickname that just sounded too familiar. Too intimate. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe it was nothing, right? But the next day, I found a picture of her and this guy at a fancy restaurant, my wife, looking all dolled up and smiling like she hadn't smiled at me in months. And this guy? He was a soccer player. A famous one, no less. His name is Leo Ortega, and I'm sure some of you might know him. He's got endorsement deals, the whole golden boy thing going on. I couldn't believe it. That's when I knew. It wasn't just my imagination running wild. She was cheating. The next couple of days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd found. Leo Ortega. That guy. A famous soccer player, rolling in money, with his fancy restaurants, resorts, and hotels. And my wife. My wife, who's always told me how much she appreciates what I do, was out there living this lavish life behind my back. While I'm out here in the sun, laying bricks, sweating my ass off, just to keep the bills paid, she's out there living it up. I started putting pieces together, trying to remember when things started feeling off. The late nights. The sudden love for high-end clothes. The way she'd come back from these girls' nights with that glow, like she'd just had the time of her life. And I was just sitting there, barely scraping by, trying to keep the house together. It wasn't until I started digging deeper that I found out just how deep this affair went. I went through her phone again. This time, I wasn't trying to be subtle. I was on a mission. There were pictures, more texts, and even a few videos. Videos of her and Leo at a resort, laughing and kissing. They were planning trips. Trips that she said were business or work conferences, but turned out to be weekend getaways with him. The thing that stung the most wasn't just the pictures. It was the way she lied to me. She'd look me in the eye and tell me she was working late when, in reality, she was on a private yacht with him, sipping champagne, living a life I'd never be able to give her. I felt like I was going to throw up. My stomach turned. The betrayal was so raw, so sharp, that I couldn't even breathe for a moment. How could she do this? How could she lie so easily to my face? To our kids' faces? I was mad, so mad that I couldn't think straight. But even more than anger, I felt humiliated. I was nothing compared to this guy. A famous, rich athlete who could offer her everything I couldn't. The shame of knowing I wasn't enough, it crushed me. But the worst part? I still loved her. I didn't know what to do with that. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't know how. I kept replaying all the times she lied to me in my head, those lies, and it made my blood boil. But I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. I decided to do it when she came home from work that evening. I'd been holding off on the confrontation for a couple of days, hoping maybe I was wrong, maybe it was all just some misunderstanding. But as the days dragged on and the evidence stacked up, I realized I wasn't wrong. She was lying, and I deserved answers. She walked in like everything was normal, like she didn't have a care in the world. I could see she was in one of her "I'm going out" moods, dressed to the nines, hair perfectly styled, those heels that made her look like a stranger to me. The second she stepped through the door, I just blurted it out. "Are you sleeping with him?" I asked. Her face went pale, like I'd slapped her. I couldn't read her expression. Was it guilt or fear? I didn't know. "What are you talking about?" she asked, pretending she didn't know exactly what I was talking about. I threw my phone down on the table, the one with the photos, the texts, the whole damn record of her affair with Leo Ortega. "I'm talking about this," I said, pointing to the screen. "Tell me I'm seeing things. Tell me I'm crazy." She froze, her eyes flicking from me to the phone, back to me. For a long second, she didn't say a word. And then, she just sighed. Like she was exhausted. "John, it's not what you think," she started, but the tone in her voice was defensive, like she was already preparing to lie her way out of it. "Leo and it's complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed, though it came out more like a sob. "You've been lying to me for months, Sarah. Months. How is that complicated?" She looked away, her voice getting shakier. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want you to feel like you weren't enough. Leo, he makes me feel things I haven't felt in years. I never meant for this to happen, but I'm not sorry. I'm not. He gives me a life, John. A life you could never give me." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. I'd spent years, decades working to build a future for us, and she was telling me that all of that didn't matter. That I wasn't enough because I didn't have the fame and the money. The room went quiet for a moment. My hands were shaking. I wanted to yell. I wanted to throw something, to tear the house apart. But instead, I just stood there, speechless. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was drowning, like I couldn't catch my breath. She kept talking, trying to justify herself. "I never meant for it to get this far, but I've been so unhappy. You never notice me anymore, John. You're always working, always tired. I feel invisible. I'm working because I'm trying to provide for this family." I shouted, finally losing it. "What the hell did you want me to do? You want me to stop working so I can sit around and, what? Stare at you?" She crossed her arms, rolling her eyes like she was over it. "You don't get it, do you? It's not about you working. It's about me feeling alive again. And Leo, he makes me feel alive." I wanted to scream. But instead, I just said one last thing. "Fine. Then go. Go live your alive life with him." And just like that, we were at a standstill. There was no more pretending. I had my answer, and she had hers. The marriage I thought was rock solid was gone, and I was standing there, holding the pieces. The days after that confrontation were a blur. Honestly, it felt like I was walking through life on autopilot. I couldn't look at her the same way. I couldn't even look at myself the same way. The man I thought I was, the husband I thought I'd been, suddenly felt like a complete joke. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, meant nothing. It felt like she had taken everything and thrown it in my face. It wasn't just the anger, though. That was there, for sure. But the shame was what really got me. I couldn't stop thinking about how I'd been, the other guy, in my own marriage. How could I not see it? How had I let her pull the wool over my eyes for so long? I spent the first few nights sleeping on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't bring myself to go back to our bedroom, to the bed where I had shared so many years of my life with her. The thought of her in that bed now, knowing what she was doing with Leo, made me sick to my stomach. She'd come to me, pleading with me to talk, to understand. But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear how it wasn't her fault, how she was confused, or how she needed space. It all felt like more lies. I couldn't trust her anymore. The hardest part wasn't even the betrayal itself, it was the loss of the woman I thought I knew. I used to hold her in such high regard, to think she was the love of my life. But now, she was just a stranger. I couldn't believe I had built my whole world around someone who could so easily tear it apart. And the kids. Jesus. The kids were the hardest. I couldn't even look at them without feeling guilty. I had promised them a family. I had promised them that we'd always be together, that they'd have both their parents. And now I was failing them. I had no idea how to break the news to them without shattering their world. In the middle of all this, my phone kept buzzing with messages. My friends were checking in, but I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone what had really happened. What was I supposed to say? Hey, my wife's been cheating on me with a famous soccer player and now my life's falling apart. I kept it all inside. My pride, my ego, was bruised, but I didn't want anyone else to see how much it hurt. I didn't want to seem weak. I remember one night, I went for a walk. I couldn't be around her anymore. I couldn't stand the sight of her, the sound of her voice. I needed space to breathe, to think. As I walked down the empty streets, I realized how alone I was. How much I'd been taking my life for granted. I had to face the truth. I wasn't just angry at her, I was angry at myself for letting it get this far. How had I let her pull away from me? How had I let this happen? But somewhere deep down, I also knew I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. Spent a week in limbo, not knowing what to do. It was like I was living in this gray area between denial and anger. Sarah was still there, still living in the house, still trying to talk to me, trying to apologize, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. Every time she opened her mouth, all I could hear was the echo of her lies. Then one evening, she sat down beside me. I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for something, some sign that I was ready to move past this. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. She still hadn't truly faced what she'd done. She was still more worried about us than about the hurt she had caused. I had two choices: I could either try to forgive her and work through this, however impossible that seemed, or I could walk away. But I couldn't do both. And as I sat there, thinking about it, everything came into focus. I thought about the years of our relationship, the sacrifices I had made for her, the promises we'd made to each other. And I thought about her. Really thought about her. The woman she was now. The woman who'd found a new life without me. I realized that I couldn't keep trying to fix something that was already broken beyond repair. I didn't owe her anything. I didn't owe her my forgiveness just because she was sorry now. I had given her everything I had, and she threw it away for the sparkle of a rich, famous guy who could give her everything I couldn't. I wasn't perfect. I knew that. But I wasn't going to keep putting myself second. Not anymore. I can't do this anymore, I told her. The words felt heavier than I expected. It was like a weight lifting off my chest, but it also felt like I was cutting ties with a part of myself. She looked at me, her face full of disbelief. What? What do you mean? I'm done, Sarah. I can't forgive you for what you've done to me. To this family. I could see her eyes well up with tears, but I didn't care. I had done everything I could, and she had chosen someone else. Chosen a life without me. I know I've hurt you, she said, voice breaking. But please, don't leave me. We can fix this. We can try again. I shook my head. You don't get it. You've already made your choice. And it's not me. She didn't say anything after that. She just looked at me like she was waiting for me to change my mind. But I was resolute. It was over. I couldn't live in the shadow of her lies any longer. We sat in silence for what felt like forever. But eventually, she stood up, wiping her eyes. I'll pack my things, she whispered. The days after Sarah left were a mix of relief and guilt. I didn't know how to feel. I was angry at her, sure. I was heartbroken, too. But at the same time, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I didn't have to pretend everything was fine. I didn't have to lie to myself or to the kids anymore. But that didn't mean it was easy. It wasn't like I just went on with my life. It wasn't that simple. There were nights when I still found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering what went wrong. What did I miss? How did I get so caught up in trying to make her happy that I lost myself in the process? The kids were the hardest part. I had to sit them down and explain to them that mommy and daddy weren't going to be together anymore. I could see the confusion in their eyes. They didn't understand why things had changed. Why Sarah wasn't coming home anymore. And that broke me. I kept it together for them, but there were nights when I couldn't hold back the tears. I didn't want to let them see me cry, but the hurt, the deep hurt, was still there. They asked questions I couldn't answer. They wanted to know why mommy wasn't around, why she didn't come to their soccer games anymore, why she wasn't at the dinner table. All I could say was that sometimes people change. I didn't tell them the truth. They didn't need to know about the affair. They didn't need to know that the woman they loved had chosen another life over the one we built together. And then there were the calls. The endless calls from Sarah, asking if we could talk, if we could try to fix things. But every time she called, I felt my stomach churn. I knew that no matter how much she said she was sorry, nothing would change. She had already made her choice. I couldn't go back to that. I didn't want to be a bitter, angry guy. But I couldn't help it. Every time I saw her face, whether it was in a photo or in the brief moments we'd interact when she picked up the kids, there was a part of me that couldn't forgive her. I kept thinking about how she'd been living a life of luxury while I was out here busting my ass to make sure our family was okay. But there was something else, too. Something I wasn't expecting. I started to realize that I was actually better off without her. I'd spent so many years trying to keep her happy, trying to live up to some ideal of what she needed, that I had forgotten who I was. I had become so wrapped up in her and what she wanted that I lost sight of my own happiness. And in the silence, in the weeks of being on my own, I started to find myself again. I spent more time with the kids, more time doing things that made me happy. I started working out more, focusing on my health. I even started taking up a hobby I'd forgotten about, woodworking. Something about working with my hands, creating something from nothing, made me feel alive again. It wasn't easy, but I was beginning to heal. When I thought I had my life figured out again, everything seemed to take another unexpected turn. It started with a message from Sarah, again. She'd reached out multiple times before, but I'd ignored her. This time, though, there was something different about it. She wasn't just apologizing. She wasn't asking for another chance. She was telling me that she was pregnant. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, my heart racing. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think straight. My mind immediately went to the worst place. Was the baby even mine? Was this some sort of final attempt to drag me back into her life, to guilt me into coming back because she had Leo's kid and needed me to be the good guy for the sake of the family? I immediately called her. She picked up on the second ring. John, Is it mine? I cut her off before she could even finish her sentence. There was a pause. Of course it is, she said, but there was a shakiness to her voice, like she wasn't sure I'd believe her. I didn't know what to say. What was I supposed to say? I wanted to scream at her, to accuse her of manipulating me again. But instead, all I could muster was a cold, "So, what now?" She seemed to hesitate before answering. "I don't know, John. I thought you should know. I know things between us are complicated. But I thought you should hear it from me. I couldn't handle it. The thought of her pregnant with someone else's child, someone who wasn't me, was too much. It felt like salt being poured into an open wound. It made me question everything all over again. Was I just part of her life's backup plan? "Look, Sarah," I said, my voice quieter now, barely above a whisper, "I'm not coming back. You and I, whatever it was, it's over. I can't keep playing this game with you." She didn't argue. She didn't beg. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement in her voice, almost like she'd finally realized I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. "I'm sorry, John. I really am." The conversation ended with a finality that felt cold, but somehow, necessary. It was like everything that had been left unsaid, all those years of pretending, was suddenly out in the open. In the weeks that followed, I learned that Sarah went through with the pregnancy. I didn't ask for updates, didn't reach out. And I didn't want to know what happened. It was strange to think about her moving on, starting a family with someone else, while I was just trying to keep it together. But then, out of nowhere, I got a call from one of my buddies, a guy who worked with me in construction, someone I'd known for years. He told me that Leo Ortega had been spotted around town, at a local bar, of all places. Apparently, Sarah had been spotted with him again, like nothing had changed, like they were picking up right where they left off. Something in me snapped. I'd moved on, or at least I thought I had. But that news hit like a freight train. She was doing it all over again. But I didn't want to be the guy who was consumed by her anymore. I wasn't going to be the bitter ex-husband, stewing in my anger, letting her dictate my emotions. I had been through enough already. So, I made the choice not to let it bother me. I blocked her number. I focused on myself and my kids. I threw myself into my work, into my passion for woodworking. And little by little, I started to realize that while Sarah had been my world, I was still my own person. I wasn't defined by her or by what we had. I was my own man again. The real turning point for me came when I least expected it. A few months after Sarah left, I was still figuring out how to be a single dad. The kids had adjusted better than I thought they would, but I knew it wasn't easy for them either. There were moments when I'd catch them staring out the window, waiting for her to come home, or asking when they could see her again. It broke my heart every time. One afternoon, I was sitting outside in the backyard, just trying to unwind after a long day, when my neighbor, Mark, came over. He's an older guy, retired, always friendly, always willing to lend a hand. He's one of those people who can make you feel like everything will be okay, even when you're struggling to believe it yourself. "Hey, John," he said, leaning on the fence between our yards. "How you holding up?" I gave him a half-hearted smile. "You know, one day at a time, Mark." He nodded like he understood, then hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Listen, I'm not one to poke my nose into other people's business, but I've been watching you for a while now. And I know what you're going through. I've been there. Divorce isn't easy. But you're doing better than you think. You're not letting it break you." I didn't know what to say at first. He was right. I wasn't letting it break me, but I wasn't exactly thriving either. I was just getting by. "You've got something a lot of people don't," he continued, his voice softening. "You've got grit. You've got a heart that's still in the right place. Don't forget that." I had to fight to hold back the tears. I didn't want to cry in front of Mark. He was just trying to be nice, but there was something about his words that hit me in a way nothing else had in a long time. It was like he saw me, really saw me, in a way that I hadn't allowed myself to see myself in a long time. Mark didn't just walk away after that. No, he hung out for a while. He helped me with some things around the house, small stuff, like fixing a leaky faucet or trimming the bushes. It wasn't much, but it felt like a lifeline. Having someone there, even in the background, was comforting in ways I didn't expect. Over time, we started talking more. He shared stories about his own life, his own struggles. I learned that he'd been through 2 divorces, both of which were far messier than mine. But he had a way of talking about it that wasn't bitter. He had his share of anger, sure, but he'd learned to let go of the things he couldn't control. "Don't let the past define you, John," he said one day as we worked on a project together. "You get to decide who you are from here on out. No one else does." It was that conversation that finally gave me the push I needed. It wasn't just about moving on from Sarah anymore. It was about moving on for me. For my kids. I started going out more, joining a local gym, even taking up a few classes. I began to make new friends, to rebuild my life outside of the pain Sarah had left me with. And you know what? It felt good. It didn't happen overnight, and there were still days when I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, but slowly, things started clicking again. Mark's words stayed with me. I had my future to build. I wasn't the man Sarah had made me feel like I was. I wasn't some side character in her story. I was me, a man who had a lot of love to give, a lot of life left to live. Months went by. I found a rhythm, or at least a new version of it. The kids were settling into their new normal, visiting Sarah on weekends, spending time with me the rest of the time. We all still had our moments, of course. I could see the sadness in their eyes sometimes, but they were strong. Stronger than I gave them credit for. We were getting through it, one day at a time. I kept working hard. Construction wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. And something about having a purpose, something to focus on, kept my mind from wandering back to Sarah. I had to remind myself, every single day, that she wasn't part of my story anymore. I had taken up woodworking more seriously, spending my free time in the garage, crafting whatever came to mind. It was therapeutic, in a way. I could take something broken, something raw, and turn it into something beautiful. It felt like the exact opposite of what had happened to my marriage. I started to see little sparks of who I used to be, the guy who was happy with simple things, the guy who was more than just a paycheck. I started going out with friends again, doing things I hadn't done in years. I didn't need Sarah to be happy. I wasn't defined by her choices anymore. One evening, I bumped into Emily, an old friend from the past. She was a woman I'd known for years, but we'd lost touch when Sarah and I got busy with the kids and life. Emily had always been a positive influence in my life, and there was something about seeing her again that felt like a breath of fresh air. She asked me how I was doing, and for the first time in a long time, I was able to answer honestly. "I'm doing better than I thought I would," I said. "It's been tough, but I'm figuring it out. One step at a time." We talked for hours that night. It wasn't romantic, at least not at first. It was just 2 people reconnecting, 2 people who had both been through their own struggles. It felt so damn good to talk to someone who wasn't wrapped up in my past with Sarah. In the weeks that followed, Emily and I started seeing each other more. Slowly, cautiously, neither of us were in any rush. I wasn't trying to replace Sarah, but there was something about Emily's presence that made me realize I still had a lot of love to give. It wasn't easy. I wasn't fully over Sarah, not yet. But I was learning to let go. I was learning that it was okay to feel again, without all the baggage and expectations that had built up over the years. And Emily? She was kind. She was patient. She didn't push me to open up, but she made it clear that I wasn't alone in all of this. And then, one night, as I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun set, I realized something. I was okay. Not perfect, but okay. Life had gone in ways I never expected, and it had knocked me down harder than I could have imagined. But here I was, still standing. I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't angry anymore. I had learned that I couldn't control what happened to me, but I could control how I responded to it. And that was more than enough. It's been over a year since everything fell apart. I look back on that time and, honestly, I don't even recognize the guy I was back then. I don't think I could have made it through the worst of it without the support of a few key people, like Mark, my neighbor, and even Emily, who helped me rediscover that there's more to life than pain and betrayal. But here's the thing I've learned: life doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about the image you build of yourself, the dreams you chase, or the promises you make. What life cares about is how you deal with the punches when they come. It's about whether you get back up after you're knocked down, and whether you can still find meaning in your journey, even when things don't go the way you imagined. As for Sarah, I don't hate her. I don't wish her bad things. I used to be angry, even bitter, but that anger is gone. I realize now that I was just angry at myself for allowing it to happen. For not seeing the signs. But we all make mistakes, and I'll be damned if I let hers ruin the rest of my life. I've learned that love isn't a transaction. It's not about what you give to someone in exchange for their loyalty or affection. It's not about who can provide the most or live the most lavish lifestyle. It's about respect, trust, and the willingness to show up for each other, even when things are tough. And you know what? That's what I want from the next chapter of my life. I want real love. I want to be with someone who respects me, someone who sees me for who I am, and not just as some provider or safety net. The best part of all this? I don't need anyone else to validate me. Not Sarah, not anyone. I've learned to validate myself. I'm proud of the man I've become. Sure, I've got my scars, who doesn't, but they don't define me. They remind me of where I've been and how far I've come. And at the end of the day, I'm enough. If you're reading this and you're going through something similar, here's my advice: take a step back and remember who you are. Don't let someone else's choices define your worth. It doesn't matter if you're a construction worker, an office worker, or whatever, you have value. You have strength. And no matter how deep the hurt, you can get through it. You just have to believe that there's more to your story than the pain you're feeling right now. Take care of yourself. Heal. And when you're ready, open yourself up to new possibilities. Life has a funny way of giving you exactly what you need, when you least expect it. As for me, I'm still figuring things out. But for the first time in a long time, I'm excited for what's ahead. I'm not defined by my past, and I won't let anyone else try to write my future for me.